The courtroom felt like a vacuum, sucking away all the oxygen as I sat there, watching my soon-to-be ex-wife Amanda perform her carefully rehearsed act of innocence and victimhood. Her Prada suit probably cost more than what most people in this room made in a month. Her blonde hair was styled in that perfect way that screamed, "I deserve everything." The performance was flawless, tears welling up at just the right moment, voice cracking when speaking about her sacrifices. Journalists sat in the back row, pens ready to document what they assumed would be the downfall of Michael Harris, the tech magnate who abandoned his loyal wife. If only they knew the truth. "Your Honor," her attorney, Richard Simmons, a shark in an expensive suit, addressed the judge. "Mrs. Harris gave up a promising career in marketing to support her husband's business ventures. She was there through the difficult early years, offering emotional support when banks refused to lend Mr. Harris money. She cooked for potential investors, entertained business partners, and was, in every sense, a partner in building Harris Technologies from the ground up." I maintained my poker face, though inside I was laughing bitterly. Amanda had never cooked a day in her life, unless you counted ordering from five-star restaurants. The emotional support she mentioned consisted mainly of complaints about our modest apartment during the early years of my business. "Furthermore," Simmons continued, "when Mr. Harris inherited his family estate, Mrs. Harris dedicated herself to managing their household affairs, allowing him to focus entirely on expanding the business. She is entitled to half of everything they built together, as well as half of the inherited assets which, through her efforts, have increased in value substantially." Judge Eleanor Wilson, a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for fairness and zero tolerance for theatrics, glanced at me, then at my attorney, David Foster, who sat calmly beside me, thumbing through documents we'd prepared meticulously over the last 6 months. "Mr. Foster, your response," Judge Wilson asked. "We'll present our case shortly, Your Honor," David replied with calculated restraint. "But I'd like to note for the record that many of the claims just made are not only exaggerated, but demonstrably false." Amanda's face twitched slightly, the tiniest break in her mask of righteousness. She quickly recovered, but I caught it. After 7 years of marriage, I'd become an expert at spotting her micro-expressions. They were often the only hints of honesty in a relationship built on deception. As David spoke, I found my mind drifting back to that fateful night in New York 5 years ago, when Amanda walked into my life like a perfectly targeted missile. The charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art wasn't my scene. I'd only attended because a major investor insisted. The room sparkled with wealth, diamonds catching light, champagne flowing freely, laughter that seemed practiced rather than genuine. I was about to make my excuses and leave when I spotted her across the room. Amanda Blake stood out, not just because of her stunning looks, though the red dress that hugged her curves certainly caught attention, but because of the way she moved. There was purpose in her gestures, intelligence in her eyes. She was talking animatedly with the CEO of a major financial institution, and unlike the vapid socialites dotting the event, she seemed to be saying something worth hearing. When our eyes met, she smiled, not the practiced social smile I'd seen all evening, but something that felt almost conspiratorial, as if we both recognized we were outsiders in this glittering world of old money and older prejudices. "You look like you're planning your escape route," she said, suddenly beside me, the scent of her perfume, something subtle and expensive, filling my senses. "That obvious," I replied, surprised by her directness. "I'm Amanda," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "Michael Harris." "I know." Her smile widened. "The guy who's revolutionizing supply chain management with blockchain technology. I read your profile in Tech Innovators last month. I was impressed. Few people outside the industry understood what my company actually did." "Don't look so surprised," she laughed. "I work in brand marketing for tech startups. Your company's integration of blockchain for verifying ethical sourcing is exactly what many of my clients need." For the next 2 hours, we talked business, technology, market trends. She was knowledgeable, insightful, challenging my ideas in ways that made me reconsider certain assumptions. By the time the gala was winding down, I'd completely forgotten my desire to leave early. "We should continue this conversation," I said, feeling genuinely reluctant to end our interaction. "We should," she agreed, taking my phone and entering her number. "But next time, somewhere less pretentious. I know a great little jazz club in Greenwich Village. 3 days later, we met at the club, an intimate space with worn leather booths and the best live music I'd heard in years. Amanda arrived wearing jeans and a simple black top that somehow looked more elegant than the designer dresses at the gala. She was knowledgeable about jazz, too, explaining the nuances of bebop versus swing as we sipped bourbon and let the music wash over us. "So, Michael Harris," she said during a break between sets, "tell me something about yourself that isn't in that tech innovator's profile." "I grew up on a ranch in Texas," I admitted. "My father raised cattle and grew alfalfa. He thought computers were a passing fad." She laughed. "And now his son is a tech entrepreneur? What does he think about that?" Aha. A shadow must have crossed my face because her expression immediately softened. "He died before I started the company," I said. "Heart attack while working the fields. The ranch is still in the family, though. I couldn't bring myself to sell it." "I'm sorry," she said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. Her gesture seemed genuine, her eyes reflecting real empathy. "Do you ever go back?" "Once a year, to check on the property manager and walk the land. It's complicated. I loved my father, but we had different visions for my future." "That must be difficult," she said, carrying those unresolved feelings. Sokrum, for some reason, maybe the bourbon, maybe the mournful saxophone in the background, maybe just the unexpected comfort of speaking to someone who seemed truly interested, I found myself telling Amanda about my complicated relationship with my father, about his disappointment when I left for MIT instead of agricultural college, about the last argument we had, where he accused me of abandoning my heritage. "But you kept the ranch," she noted thoughtfully. "That says something important about you, Michael. You honor your roots even as you forge your own path." Her words hit me like a physical touch, warming places inside me that had been cold for years. In that moment, I felt understood in a way I hadn't since my mother passed away when I was 15. "You know what's strange?" I said, surprised by my own openness. "I keep the ranch, but I can barely bring myself to stay there for more than a day at a time. Too many ghosts, too many unfinished conversations." "Maybe someday you'll finish those conversations," she suggested, her fingers still lightly resting on mine. "Not with him, but with yourself." By the end of the night, I felt seen in a way I hadn't experienced in years of climbing the tech industry ladder. Amanda Blake wasn't just beautiful and smart. She seemed to understand me on a fundamental level. How could I have known it was all calculated? That every response, every thoughtful question, every seemingly spontaneous moment of connection was part of a meticulous campaign to infiltrate my life. Our whirlwind romance proceeded with a momentum that should have raised red flags. Within 6 months of that first meeting, Amanda had moved into my Manhattan apartment. She'd introduced me to her carefully curated social circle, artists, intellectuals, and business people who all seemed to adore her. She'd integrated herself so seamlessly into my life that I couldn't remember what it had been like before her. The proposal happened during a weekend trip to the Hamptons. We were walking along the beach at sunset, a cliche I realize now, but it felt magical at the time. Amanda had been talking about the future, about building something lasting together. "I've never met anyone like you, Michael," she said, stopping to face me, the ocean breeze tousling her hair. "You're brilliant and ambitious, but you're also kind. Do you know how rare that combination is?" I pulled the ring box from my pocket, a 3-carat diamond set in platinum. Her eyes widened, not with surprise, another red flag I missed, but with unmistakable triumph, quickly disguised as emotion. "Amanda Blake, will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, tears streaming down her face as I slipped the ring onto her finger. "God, yes." The kiss that followed felt electric. I was the happiest man alive, convinced I'd found my perfect partner, someone who understood both my business ambitions and the complicated man beneath the successful entrepreneur facade. 2 weeks before the wedding, my attorney Tom Lawson requested a meeting. Tom had been handling my legal affairs since I started my company, and I trusted his judgment implicitly. "Michael," he said when we were seated in his office, "we need to discuss a prenuptial agreement." I frowned. "Is that really necessary? Amanda and I have been completely transparent about finances." Tom leaned forward, his expression serious. "It's standard procedure for someone with your assets. It protects both parties and sets clear expectations." "It feels like I'm planning for failure before we even start," I argued. Think of it as insurance, Tom countered. You don't buy fire insurance because you expect your house to burn down. You buy it because you're being prudent. After considerable back and forth, I reluctantly agreed. Tom drafted a comprehensive document that protected my business interests in the ranch while still being generous to Amanda in case of divorce. When I presented it to her, I expected resistance or hurt feelings. Instead, Amanda surprised me with her reaction. Of course we should have a prenup, she said, barely glancing at the document. It's the smart thing to do. You've worked too hard to build your company to leave anything to chance. She signed it without even reading the details, waving away my attempts to explain the terms. I trust you, Michael. This is just paperwork. It doesn't change what we're building together. Her casualness about signing should have been another warning sign, but I was too enamored, too convinced of our perfect partnership to question it. Instead, I felt a surge of love for this woman who seemed to understand the practical necessities of our situation without drama. The wedding at the Plaza Hotel was everything Amanda wanted. Lavish flowers, a custom Vera Wang gown, 500 guests including tech industry leaders and society figures. I paid for it all without complaint, viewing it as an investment in our happiness. For the first year, marriage was everything I'd hoped. Amanda was supportive during a critical expansion phase of my business, accompanying me to investor meetings and charming potential partners. She redecorated our apartment with impeccable taste. We traveled extensively, Paris, Tokyo, Cape Town, documenting our seemingly perfect life for social media. Then my father's attorney called. The property manager who had been overseeing the ranch had embezzled significant funds and mismanaged the property. Furthermore, my father had maintained an investment portfolio I hadn't known about, which had grown considerably since his death. You need to come to Texas, the attorney insisted. There are decisions to be made about the property and the investments. Amanda was enthusiastic about the trip. We could renovate the main house, she suggested on the flight to Dallas. Turn it into a weekend retreat, something rustic but luxurious. The ranch looked nothing like I remembered. The fields were neglected, fences broken, cattle gone. The house where I'd grown up, a modest two-story structure built by my grandfather, was in disrepair. Standing in my childhood bedroom, looking at faded posters of space shuttles and robotics competitions, I felt a profound sense of loss and guilt. I should have been more involved, should have honored my heritage better, despite my differences with my father. Amanda, meanwhile, was taking measurements and making notes on her tablet. We'll need to gut the entire place, she said. Start fresh. I'm thinking open concept, floor-to-ceiling windows to capture the landscape. This was my home, I said quietly. She glanced up, momentarily confused by my sentiment, then quickly adjusted. And we'll honor that history, Michael. But we also need to make it functional for our lifestyle. I ran my hand along the wooden door frame where my father had marked my height every birthday until I was 16. This isn't just about functionality, Amanda. These walls, they're the last physical connection I have to my parents. She paused, setting down her tablet. Coming to stand beside me, she traced the height markings with her own fingers. I understand, she said softly. We'll preserve what matters most to you. I promise. Her sensitivity in that moment touched me deeply. I believed her. Another mistake in a long series of misjudgments. The meeting with my father's attorney revealed that, despite the property manager's theft, the ranch and investment portfolio were worth considerably more than I'd realized. My father, for all his rural pragmatism, had been shrewder about money than I'd given him credit for. The mineral rights alone are worth millions, the attorney explained, and the investments are primarily in blue-chip stocks and municipal bonds. Very conservative, very stable. That night, in our hotel in Dallas, Amanda was unusually affectionate. I'm so proud of you, she murmured, trailing kisses down my neck. You're honoring your father's legacy while building your own. It's sexy as hell. When we returned to New York, Amanda quit her marketing job. With the ranch renovation and managing our social obligations, I need to focus on supporting you full-time, she explained. Plus, we're financially secure enough now that I can be more selective about my career moves. I didn't question it. Having Amanda fully available to manage our increasingly complex life seemed like a luxury worth indulging. She took charge of the ranch renovation, hiring architects and contractors, flying to Texas monthly to oversee progress. Our life settled into a new pattern. I focused on growing Harris Technologies, while Amanda handled everything else: our social calendar, household staff, investments, property management. She had access to all our accounts and complete autonomy over spending. The first signs of trouble came subtly. Credit card statements with charges I didn't recognize. Weekend trips to destinations she was vague about. Phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered a room. Conference in Boston, she'd say casually. Just boring marketing stuff. Run those charges. I'm planning a surprise for your birthday. Don't ruin it by asking questions. I wanted to believe her. The alternative, that the woman I'd built my life around was deceiving me, was too painful to consider. 6 months after starting the ranch renovation, I decided to surprise Amanda by joining her in Texas without warning. I told her I was tied up with meetings all weekend, then caught an early flight Friday morning. I rented a car at the Dallas airport and drove the familiar route to my childhood home, imagining her delight at seeing me unexpectedly. What I found at the ranch shattered any remaining illusions about our marriage. The house, my childhood home, was gone. Not just under renovation, completely demolished. In its place was a construction site for what appeared to be a modernist monstrosity of glass and steel. Nothing like the warm, wooden structure where I'd grown up. Workers in hard hats swarmed the property. Heavy machinery roared. And in the center of it all stood Amanda, gesturing animatedly as she spoke with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, dark-haired, expensively dressed in a way that seemed out of place in rural Texas. I parked and approached slowly, my shock giving way to a cold, creeping anger unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Amanda's back was to me, but the man saw me coming. He said something to her, and she turned, surprise flashing across her face before she composed herself into a smile. "Michael, what are you doing here? This was supposed to be a surprise." "It certainly is," I replied, my voice unnaturally calm as I surveyed the destruction of my heritage. "Where's my house, Amanda?" "Darling, I know this looks drastic, but the foundation was compromised. The structural engineer said it couldn't be saved." She approached, reaching for my hand, but I stepped back. "We're building something beautiful in its place, something that honors the land while looking toward the future." "Who authorized this?" I demanded. "When did a renovation become a complete demolition?" "I tried to call you when we discovered the structural issues, but you were in that marathon board meeting last month. Decisions had to be made quickly to keep the project on schedule." Her explanation flowed too smoothly, too rehearsed. "And who's this?" I asked, nodding toward the man who stood watching our exchange with barely concealed impatience. "James Woodward," she said quickly, "our architect and project manager. James, this is my husband, Michael." The man extended his hand. "Mr. Harris, your wife has told me so much about you. I'm sorry about the old house, but you're going to love what we're creating here." I ignored his hand. "I'd like to see the structural engineer's report." Amanda's smile faltered. "It's at the site office. I'll have them send it to you next week. I want to see it now." "Michael, don't be difficult," she said, lowering her voice. "We have guests coming for dinner at the hotel tonight, James and some of the other project leads. We can discuss all this later." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw a stranger. Not the woman I'd fallen in love with, not my partner, but someone with her own agenda that had nothing to do with my happiness or our shared future. "There's no structural report, is there?" I said quietly. The man, James, cleared his throat. "I should check on the foundation work. Mrs. Harris will continue our discussion at dinner." He retreated hastily, sensing the marital storm brewing. Once he was gone, Amanda's demeanor changed. "Don't make a scene, Michael. This is business. The old house was a teardown. Anyone with eyes could see that. I'm creating something worthy of your success." "My success?" I echoed. "Or your ambition. This was my childhood home, Amanda. The only physical connection I had left to my parents. It was a decaying farmhouse in the middle of nowhere," she snapped, her mask slipping further. "I'm turning it into a showplace where we can entertain properly, where we can build the kind of connections that take your company to the next level. You promised to preserve what mattered to me. I preserved the land, the views, the potential." She gestured at the construction site. "This is what matters now. The future, not the past." I turned away from her, walking to where the old oak tree still stood, the one place on the property that remained unchanged. My father had hung a tire swing from its lowest branch when I was 8. I'd spent countless summer days reading in its shade. Amanda followed, her voice softening. Michael, I know change is hard, but trust me, when you see the finished product, you'll understand why this was necessary. I didn't respond. In that moment, the gulf between us felt unbridgeable. I wasn't just angry about the house. I was mourning the relationship I thought we had, one built on mutual understanding and respect. I'm going back to New York, I said finally. Finish your dinner with James and the others. We'll talk when you return. Her relief was palpable. That's probably best. You're upset now, but once you've had time to think it through, don't tell me how I feel or what I'll think, I interrupted, my voice deadly quiet. You've done enough of that already. I drove back to Dallas in silence, my mind working through every conversation we'd had about the ranch, every promise she'd made and broken. By the time I boarded the plane to New York, a cold clarity had replaced my initial shock and anger. I needed to know what else Amanda had been lying about. Then came the foundation. Amanda announced she was starting a charitable organization focused on technology education for underprivileged youth, a worthy cause that aligned with my values. I need initial funding to get it off the ground, she explained. Just $1 million to start. We'll raise more through your business connections. I transferred the money without hesitation. The Amanda Harris Foundation was established with considerable fanfare, including a launch gala attended by tech industry luminaries and covered by major publications. 6 months later, when I asked about the foundation's progress, Amanda became defensive. These things take time, Michael. Building programs, establishing partnerships, it can't be rushed just because you're used to the fast pace of tech development. It was our first serious argument. I pointed out that I had a right to know how the foundation bearing our name was using my donation. She accused me of not trusting her judgment. After everything I've sacrificed for you, she said, tears streaming down her face, I gave up my career to support yours. I manage our homes, our social obligations, everything. And you can't even trust me with this one thing that's mine. I backed down, feeling guilty for questioning her, but a seed of doubt had been planted. That night, unable to sleep, I checked our joint accounts on my tablet. What I found sent a chill through me. Large transfers from our main account to others I didn't recognize. Significant withdrawals coinciding with Amanda's business trips. Credit card charges for hotel rooms and restaurants in New York on weekends when she was supposedly visiting her sister in Connecticut. The next morning, I called Tom Lawson. I need a private investigator, I said without preamble, someone discreet, and I need you to get me detailed records of all our accounts for the past 2 years. Michael, Tom's voice was careful. Are you sure about this? No, I admitted. That's why I need the investigator. Tom recommended Jack Reynolds, a former NYPD detective who specialized in high net worth cases. Jack was in his 50s, with the weathered face of someone who'd seen it all and the kind eyes of someone who still managed to care. I don't make judgments, he told me during our initial meeting in Tom's office. I just find facts. What you do with those facts is your business. For the next 2 months, Jack followed Amanda during her supposed business trips and foundation meetings. He obtained records of the Amanda Harris Foundation, tracked phone calls, and compiled financial transactions. When he presented his findings, the evidence was irrefutable. The foundation existed primarily on paper. No programs had been implemented, no scholarships awarded. The $1 million I donated had been systematically siphoned through a series of shell companies to private accounts. But that wasn't the worst of it. She's been having an affair, Jack said, sliding photographs across the desk. Jason Blackwood, financial consultant based in Manhattan. The photos showed Amanda and Jason in intimate situations, entering his apartment building, dining at exclusive restaurants, walking hand in hand through Central Park. They've been together at least a year based on electronic records, Jack continued. Text messages suggest they're planning a future together. He hesitated before adding, there's evidence they're planning to clean you out, Mr. Harris. Conversations about accessing accounts, transferring assets offshore. They're waiting for something, though it's not clear what. The betrayal was total. Every aspect of our life together had been a calculated performance. I felt physically ill looking at the evidence, but also strangely relieved. The inconsistencies that had been nagging at me finally made sense. There's one more thing, Jack said, about the ranch renovation. The contractors Amanda had hired were charging 3 times market rate, with the excess being directed to yet another account under her control. And the architect, James Woodward. He was Jason Blackwood's brother. What do you want to do? Tom asked when Jack had left. End it, I said. All of it. 2 days later, I confronted Amanda. She'd just returned from what she claimed was a foundation meeting. I was sitting in our living room, a glass of bourbon in hand, when she breezed in. You wouldn't believe the day I've had, she began, dropping her Hermes bag on the console table. The program director for the coding initiative is completely incompetent. I'm thinking of replacing... Stop, I said quietly. Just stop, Amanda. Something in my tone made her freeze. Her eyes darted around the room, calculating. What's wrong, Michael? Are you not feeling well? I know about Jason, I said. I know about the foundation money. I know about the ranch contractors. I know everything. For a moment, she looked genuinely shocked. Then her expression hardened. I don't know what you think you know. I have proof, I interrupted. Bank records, photos, text messages, enough to destroy you in court and possibly put you in prison for fraud. She changed tactics instantly, crossing to kneel beside my chair, tears welling in her eyes. Michael, please. Whatever you've seen, there's an explanation. I love you. We can work through this. I stood, moving away from her touch. I've already filed for divorce. Tom is drawing up the papers. Given the prenup and the evidence of your activities, you'll leave this marriage with exactly what you brought into it. Nothing. Her transformation was remarkable. The tears vanished, replaced by cold fury. You think it's that simple, she hissed. I've given you 7 years of my life. I know things about your business, your investors. I've made connections you need. Threats now. I raised an eyebrow. That's not very smart, Amanda. Not with what I have on you. I'll fight you, she said, standing to face me. I'll tell everyone how you controlled me, isolated me, forced me to manage your affairs while denying me any real partnership. I'll drag your name through every court and media outlet until Harris is synonymous with abusive husband. You're welcome to try, I replied, surprised by my own calmness. But I think you'll find it difficult to maintain that narrative alongside evidence of your affair and financial fraud. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across her face. Then she grabbed her bag. This isn't over, she said, heading for the door. Not by a long shot. The next day, I received a text from an unknown number. Central Park, Bethesda Fountain, 3 p.m. Come alone if you want to salvage anything from this mess. -J, I recognized the initial immediately. Jason Blackwood wanted to meet. Against my better judgment, and without telling Tom or Jack, I went. He was waiting on a bench, looking like he belonged on the cover of a financial magazine in his tailored suit and designer sunglasses. When he saw me approach, he stood, extending his hand as if we were meeting for a business lunch. I ignored the gesture. Make it quick. I have actual work to do. Look, Harris, he said, dropping his hand. This doesn't have to get ugly. Amanda made some mistakes, but so did you. Fascinating perspective, I replied. Please elaborate on how I'm responsible for my wife stealing from me and cheating with you. He sighed, removing his sunglasses to reveal eyes calculating enough to match Amanda's. You neglected her. She was lonely. Things happened. The point is, a public divorce will hurt everyone involved. Your business reputation, Amanda's social standing, my professional credibility. Should have thought about that before you started planning to clean me out, I said, quoting the text messages Jack had intercepted. Jason had the grace to look uncomfortable. Those messages were taken out of context. Amanda can be dramatic in her phrasing. What do you want, Blackwood? I didn't come here to listen to excuses. A reasonable settlement, he said, leaning forward. 10 million. Amanda signs an NDA. You both move on quietly. No media circus, no embarrassing court revelations. I laughed, genuinely amused. You really don't get it, do you? This isn't a negotiation. The prenup she signed limits her to 2 million after 5 years of marriage. Given her documented theft and breach of fiduciary duty, she'll be lucky if I don't press criminal charges. Be reasonable, Harris. Amanda has nothing without the settlement. She should have thought of that before demolishing my childhood home and stealing $1 million from a fake charity, I interrupted. Tell me, was that your idea or hers? The foundation scheme has a certain financial elegance that seems more your style. He didn't respond, which was answer enough. Let me be very clear, I continued. Amanda will get exactly what the prenup stipulates, minus what she's already stolen. There will be no additional settlement, no matter how many threats you two cook up. If you push this, I'll make sure every financial institution in New York knows exactly what kind of consultant you really are. I stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. When this is over and she's left with nothing, are you still planning that future together? Or was that conditional on her bringing my money to the table? The flicker in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. That's what I thought, I said, walking away. True to her word, Amanda fought the divorce viciously. She hired Richard Simmons, a divorce attorney known for aggressive tactics and media manipulation. She gave tearful interviews to sympathetic journalists, painting herself as a devoted wife, blindsided by a controlling, ungrateful husband. Michael Harris wants to discard me now that I've helped build his empire, she told a popular women's magazine. He promised me partnership in life and in business. But when I started my own foundation, he couldn't handle my independence. The narrative gained traction in certain circles. I received angry messages on social media, was confronted at business events, even had drinks thrown in my face by strangers who'd read Amanda's version of events. Through it all, Tom advised patience. Let her make noise, he said. We have facts on our side. Facts win in court. And now, after 6 grueling months, we were finally before Judge Wilson. Amanda had rejected all settlement offers, confident in her ability to sway the court in public opinion. She was seeking half of everything: my company, the ranch, the investment portfolio, plus additional punitive damages for emotional distress. Your Honor, Richard Simmons was saying, Mrs. Harris gave up her promising career in marketing to support her husband's ambitions. She managed their properties, represented them in social circles critical to business networking, and launched a foundation that enhanced Mr. Harris's reputation in the tech community. She is entitled to equitable distribution of all assets acquired during the marriage, as well as a portion of the appreciated value of premarital assets she helped manage. Amanda nodded solemnly beside him, the picture of a wronged woman seeking only justice. Judge Wilson turned to us. Mr. Foster, your response to these claims? David stood, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, we have evidence that directly contradicts Mrs. Harris's claims. While Mr. Harris acknowledges that his wife played a social role during their marriage, we can demonstrate that her contributions to his business were minimal and that her management of their properties resulted in significant financial impropriety. Amanda's lawyer jumped up. Objection. Counsel is making accusations without presenting evidence. I'm about to present that evidence, Your Honor, David replied calmly. With the court's permission. Judge Wilson nodded. Proceed, Mr. Foster. David walked toward the bench carrying a sealed envelope. Your Honor, I'd like to submit this as Exhibit A. He handed the envelope to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Wilson. She opened it carefully, removing a document that I knew well, the prenuptial agreement Amanda had signed so casually before our wedding. This is a valid prenuptial agreement, signed by both parties and properly notarized, David explained. It clearly stipulates that Harris Technologies remains the sole property of Mr. Harris in the event of divorce, as does the Texas ranch and any inherited assets. It provides for a settlement of $2 million to Mrs. Harris after 5 years of marriage, an amount Mr. Harris is prepared to honor despite evidence of Mrs. Harris's breach of fiduciary duty and marital obligations. Judge Wilson examined the document carefully, then looked at Amanda and her attorney. Mr. Simmons, were you aware of this agreement? Richard looked flustered. Your Honor, my client informs me she signed this under duress, without proper legal counsel. We contend that the agreement is unconscionable and should be set aside. That's not true, Your Honor, David interjected. We have video of the signing, which clearly shows Mrs. Harris stating she had reviewed the document with her own attorney and understood its terms. Amanda's face paled. I had insisted on recording the signing precisely because she had been so casual about it. At the time, it was to protect her. Now it was protecting me. David continued methodically. Furthermore, Your Honor, we have substantial evidence of Mrs. Harris's breach of marital obligations and fiduciary duties, which would invalidate any claims beyond the prenuptial agreement. He presented the court with a carefully organized binder of evidence, bank records showing Amanda's systematic theft from our joint accounts in the foundation, photos documenting her affair with Jason, text messages between them discussing their plans to clean out my accounts. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Wilson reviewed the evidence. Amanda whispered frantically to her attorney, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Your Honor, Richard tried again, These allegations, even if true, don't negate Mrs. Harris's contributions to her husband's business success and the appreciation of his assets during the marriage. Actually, they do, David countered. Under state law, financial misconduct and adultery can be considered when determining equitable distribution. Moreover, we have expert testimony ready to demonstrate that Mrs. Harris's management of the Texas property resulted in the destruction of historical structures and fraudulent billing that cost Mr. Harris over $3 million. Judge Wilson raised her hand to silence further argument. I've seen enough for today. We'll recess for lunch and reconvene at 1:30. As the judge left the courtroom, Amanda approached me, her attorney trailing behind looking concerned. "This isn't over, Michael," she hissed, quiet enough that only I could hear. "I know things about your business, arrangements with suppliers in Southeast Asia that wouldn't look good if they became public. Think carefully about what you're doing." I met her gaze steadily. "Are you threatening me, Amanda?" "I'm reminding you what's at stake," she replied. $2 million is insulting. I want $20 million in the New York apartment, or everyone will know exactly how Harris Technologies maintains its profit margins. Before I could respond, David stepped between us. "Mrs. Harris, all communication should go through counsel, and I should warn you that threats of extortion only strengthen our case." She turned on her heel and stalked away, Richard hurrying after her with a worried expression. "What was that about?" David asked when they were out of earshot. "She's grasping at straws," I said. "There's nothing improper about our supply chain. We've been independently certified for ethical sourcing. She's bluffing." But I couldn't help wondering what other damage Amanda might try to inflict if she felt cornered. She had been at my side during critical business meetings, had access to confidential information, knew my weaknesses and vulnerabilities. The thought of what she might do out of spite was unsettling. During the lunch break, I found myself alone in the courthouse corridor, staring out a window at the busy street below. The past year had been the most difficult of my life. Discovering Amanda's betrayal, confronting the extent of her deception, fighting to protect what I'd built. I felt hollowed out, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. "You holding up okay?" Jack Reynolds appeared beside me, his weathered face concerned. "As well as can be expected," I replied. "It's surreal sitting in that courtroom, listening to her lie about our life together." Jack nodded. "I've seen it hundreds of times. The person who's wronged you tries to flip the script, make themselves the victim. It's a common tactic when the facts aren't on their side." "I keep asking myself how I missed it," I admitted. 7 years, Jack. 7 years with someone who was playing me the entire time. "Don't beat yourself up. She's good. One of the best I've seen. The long con is her specialty. She probably started researching you months before that chance meeting at the gala." I turned to him, surprised. "What makes you say that?" "The way she approached you with knowledge about your business. The perfect timing. The carefully crafted persona that matched exactly what you needed at that point in your life." Jack shrugged. "Classic targeting. I've seen it before with wealthy marks." "Marks," I repeated bitterly. "That's what I was to her. A mark." "Hey," Jack put a hand on my shoulder. "You caught on. Most don't until they're cleaned out completely, and now you're fighting back. That counts for something." When court reconvened, the atmosphere had changed. Richard Simmons approached David before the judge entered, and they had a brief, intense conversation. David returned to our table looking pleased. "They want to settle," he whispered. $2 million plus the apartment. They'll drop all other claims if we agree not to pursue criminal charges for the foundation fraud." I considered it briefly. The apartment was worth about $4 million, so the total settlement would be $6 million, more than the prenup specified, but less than a protracted legal battle might cost in legal fees and negative publicity. "No," I decided. "The prenup terms stand. $2 million minus what she's already taken, and I want a formal retraction of her public statements about me." David nodded, returning to confer with Richard. Their conversation appeared heated, with Richard repeatedly shaking his head. Judge Wilson entered, and everyone rose. "Counsel, have you reached any agreement during the recess?" she asked. "No, Your Honor," David replied. "We remain at an impasse." "Very well," she said. "Mr. Simmons, call your first witness." Richard called Amanda to the stand. She had composed herself during the break, once again the picture of dignified suffering as she was sworn in. For nearly an hour, she testified about her contributions to my success, the social connections she'd fostered, the suppliers she'd introduced me to, the countless hours spent representing our family at business functions. She spoke about sacrificing her own career ambitions to support mine, about pouring her creativity and energy into the ranch renovation to create a legacy property for our future family. Throughout her testimony, she avoided mentioning the prenup, the foundation, or Jason Blackwood. When Richard finished, David stood for cross-examination. "Mrs. Harris," he began, "you testified that you gave up a promising career in marketing to support your husband. Can you tell the court your annual income in the year before your marriage?" Amanda hesitated. "Approximately $80,000. "And your position was?" "Account executive at Bergman Marketing Group." David nodded. "And after marriage, did Mr. Harris prevent you from working?" "Not explicitly, but—" "In fact," David interrupted, "didn't you continue working at Bergman for over a year after your marriage until you voluntarily resigned?" "Yes, but—" "And when you resigned, didn't you tell your colleagues it was because, and I quote, 'I don't need to work anymore with Michael's money'?" Amanda's face flushed. "That was a joke, taken out of context." David moved on relentlessly. "You testified about your contributions to the ranch renovation. Did you consult Mr. Harris before hiring contractors to demolish the original house built by his grandfather?" "The structure wasn't salvageable." "That wasn't my question, Mrs. Harris. Did you consult your husband before authorizing the complete demolition of his childhood home?" "No," she admitted reluctantly. "And the contractors you hired, Elevation Builders, do you have any personal connection to that company?" Amanda glanced at her attorney, who looked equally uncomfortable. "I knew the principal designer socially." "Isn't it true that the principal designer, James Woodward, is the brother of Jason Blackwood, with whom you've been having an extramarital affair?" The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Wilson banged her gavel. "Order! Objection!" Richard shouted. "Counsel is making scandalous accusations without foundation." "Your Honor," David replied, "we submitted photographic evidence and text messages documenting Mrs. Harris's relationship with Mr. Blackwood. I'm establishing a pattern of financial impropriety connected to this relationship." Judge Wilson considered, then nodded. "Overruled. The witness will answer." Amanda's composure finally cracked. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "James is Jason's brother." "And isn't it true that Elevation Builders charged Mr. Harris over 3 times the market rate for the renovation, with the excess being diverted to accounts you control?" "I don't know anything about that," she insisted. David approached with another document. "This is a bank statement from Cayman National Bank, account number ending in 4372, registered to Amanda Blake Harris. Can you explain the deposits totaling $2.7 million from Elevation Builders between January and June of last year?" Amanda looked trapped. "I can't." For the next hour, David methodically dismantled every aspect of Amanda's testimony, presenting evidence of her affair, her financial misconduct, and her systematic campaign to gain control of my assets. By the time he finished, she was visibly shaken, her carefully constructed image in tatters. Richard tried to repair the damage on redirect examination, but it was too late. The facts were overwhelmingly against them. When Amanda stepped down, Richard called several of her friends to testify about her contributions to my social and business success. Their testimonies sounded rehearsed and hollow after the evidence presented against her. Then it was our turn. David called Jack Reynolds, who professionally recounted his investigation and findings. He called the Texas contractors who had assessed the unnecessary demolition of the ranch house. He called financial experts who traced Amanda's misappropriation of funds. Finally, David called me to the stand. Under his careful questioning, I described my business before meeting Amanda, the prenuptial agreement she had signed without reading, and my discovery of her deception. I spoke without anger or accusation, simply stating facts. The pain of betrayal was still raw, but I refused to let it color my testimony. During cross-examination, Richard tried to provoke an emotional response, suggesting I had been controlling, that I had pushed Amanda into managing properties without proper support, that I had neglected her emotional needs while focusing on business. I remained calm, referring back to documented facts, our equal partnership agreement, the support staff I had provided, the unlimited budget for household and personal expenses. When he brought up Amanda's foundation, I simply stated that I had donated $1 million at her request, without conditions or interference. By the time testimony concluded, it was late afternoon. Judge Wilson looked tired but focused. "I've heard enough to make a determination," she announced. "This case hinges on two key issues: the validity of the prenuptial agreement and whether Mrs. Harris's conduct constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty that would impact equitable distribution." She shuffled through the documents before continuing. "The prenuptial agreement appears properly executed, with both parties having had the opportunity for independent legal counsel. Mrs. Harris's claim that she signed under duress is not supported by the video evidence, which clearly shows her stating she had reviewed the document. Therefore, I find the prenuptial agreement valid and enforceable." Amanda closed her eyes briefly, her hands clenching in her lap. "Regarding Mrs. Harris's conduct," the judge continued, "the evidence of financial misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty is substantial and troubling. The diversion of funds from the foundation, the excessive charges for the Texas property renovation, and the unauthorized transfers from joint accounts all constitute actions contrary to the marital economic partnership." Judge Wilson looked directly at Amanda. "Mrs. Harris, the court takes a dim view of using charitable organizations for personal gain. While that matter is not directly before me today, I am referring the foundation issues to the district attorney's office for review." Amanda paled visibly. Richard placed a restraining hand on her arm as she started to rise in protest. "My ruling is as follows," Judge Wilson declared. "The prenuptial agreement will be enforced. Mr. Harris retains full ownership of Harris Technologies, the Texas Ranch property, and all inherited assets. Mrs. Harris is entitled to the settlement specified in the prenuptial agreement, $2 million, minus documented funds already misappropriated, which total approximately $3.4 million. She paused, calculating. Since the misappropriated amount exceeds the settlement amount, Mrs. Harris is not entitled to any additional payment. Furthermore, she is ordered to repay $1.4 million to Mr. Harris within 90 days. Amanda gasped audibly. "That's impossible. I don't have—" "Silence," Judge Wilson commanded. "I'm not finished. Each party will retain their separate property acquired before the marriage and any gifts specifically intended for that party. Mrs. Harris will be responsible for her own legal fees and is ordered to issue a public retraction of statements made about Mr. Harris within 30 days. The judge gathered her papers. "This court is adjourned." The finality of the gavel echoing through the courtroom felt like the period at the end of a very long, painful sentence. 7 years of my life concluded in a single afternoon of legal proceedings. As people began filing out, I saw Jason Blackwood slip out from the back row. He'd been watching the proceedings, probably hoping to see Amanda emerge victorious with millions. Now he hurried away without even acknowledging her. Amanda noticed too, her face contorted with rage and betrayal as she watched her lover abandon her, now that she had nothing to offer him. "You've ruined me," she hissed as I passed her on my way out. "I hope you're satisfied." I paused, looking at this woman I had once loved with my whole heart. "You ruined yourself, Amanda. I just refuse to let you ruin me too." She lunged suddenly, her manicured nails aimed at my face. "You heartless bastard, after everything I did for you." The bailiff intercepted her before she could reach me, restraining her as she continued to scream obscenities. Her final mask had fallen completely, revealing the vicious, calculating woman beneath the polished exterior. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, shouting questions about the verdict. David handled them skillfully, stating only that justice had been served and the truth had prevailed. As we walked to the waiting car, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: relief that the ordeal was over, sadness for what might have been, but most surprisingly, a sense of liberation. The weight of deception and doubt I'd been carrying for months had lifted. "You okay?" David asked as our driver navigated through downtown traffic. "I will be," I replied. "It's just 7 years. 7 years of my life with someone who never actually existed." "Don't think of it that way," he advised. "Think of it as 7 years of building a successful business, maintaining your integrity, and ultimately standing up for yourself when it mattered most. Those years weren't wasted, Michael. They made you stronger." That evening, alone in my apartment, our apartment, now just mine again, I poured a glass of bourbon and walked to the window overlooking Central Park. The city lights glittered below, Millions of stories playing out in windows across Manhattan. How many others were experiencing betrayal tonight? How many were finding their way back from it? My phone buzzed with a text from Tom Lawson. Just heard from Richards. Amanda's flying to the Caymans tonight, probably trying to access those accounts before they're frozen. DA's office has been notified. I didn't respond. Whatever happened to Amanda now was her own doing. The justice system would handle any criminal aspects of her actions. For my part, I was done. Another text came through, this one from Jack Reynolds. You did good today. Standing up for yourself isn't easy, especially when you once loved the person who betrayed you. That one I answered, thanks for finding the truth. It hurt, but it was necessary. Jack's reply was simple. Truth usually is both. 3 months later, I stood on the porch of a newly restored ranch house in Texas. Not the modernist monstrosity Amanda had planned, but not exactly my childhood home either. Something in between, honoring the past while acknowledging the present. The original wooden beams had been salvaged and incorporated into the new structure. My father's height markings for me had been carefully preserved and integrated into a doorway. I'd spent weekends here during the reconstruction, working alongside the local contractors, getting my hands dirty in a way that would have horrified Amanda, but would have made my father proud. The Texas sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple as I sipped my bourbon, listening to the familiar sounds of crickets and distant cattle. For the first time since discovering Amanda's betrayal, I felt genuinely at peace. My phone vibrated with a news alert. I almost ignored it, but something made me check the screen. Financial consultant Jason Blackwood arrested on fraud charges, the headline read. The accompanying article detailed a scheme involving multiple wealthy clients, fake investment opportunities, and offshore accounts. Amanda was mentioned as a person of interest still being sought by authorities. I put the phone away, returning my attention to the sunset. Their story would play out without my involvement now. My own story was taking a different direction, one built on honesty, self-respect, and the hard-won wisdom that comes from surviving betrayal. I raised my glass to the fading light, to the future, to lessons painfully learned but valuable nonetheless. The most expensive education of my life had come from Amanda Harris, and it was worth every penny to be free of her deception.